Tom is a recipient of 8 Emmy Awards, the DuPont Award for Excellence, and the Henry Luce Foundation Fellowship. Please join me in welcoming Tom Nagorski.
I'm going to sit because that's what our group will be doing momentarily. Thank you, Dick. We do, as Dick Drobnik said, have a remarkable trio of experts, professionals, people who have lived the kind of crises that we're talking about here and we'll be talking about for the next few days. Before we get started, though, I do want to say just a couple of words of thanks to people who are not only affiliated with the Asia Society, but real champions of the Asia Society, and without which certainly we would not have a center here in the Philippines, and we might suffer in other ways. If I can ask Su Yin Liu, where are you, Su Yin? Su Yin to my right. Yes, please give her a hand. Su Yin is the executive director of our great center here in Manila. You've already met Doris Ho. I just want to say one thing, which is, strangely enough, it was another natural calamity, Hurricane Sandy, that hit New York soon after I took up work at the Asia Society in October of 2012. And my assistant gave me a message on my first day back in the office. We were dealing with our own disaster issues. And my assistant said, you know, you have lunch with this woman from the Philippines today. And I thought, well, that's not going to happen because nobody's moving around and I barely got to work on my bicycle. And so I'm sure there's no lunch with Doris Ho from the Philippines. For those of you who know Doris, and I think that's most everyone in this room, you wouldn't be surprised to say that Doris not only made that lunch, but she made my day. Where are you, Doris? There you are. Thank you. You are really just a great champion. Doris is not only a member of our global board, but also the chair of the board of the Center for Asia Society in the Philippines. And lastly, and mostly, if that's a word, soon after I met Doris in New York, we had our annual dinner at the Asia Society, our global dinner. And I really didn't know very much about the organization. And I hadn't planned the honorees who we were honoring, and this was in November 2012. And I don't think I had any idea what a great privilege it was to be seated across the table that night, just about a year and a half ago, from Wash Sisip, who is, to say he's a champion of the Asia Society and so many great other institutions in the Philippines is really understatement. I think the greatest compliment beyond compliments that you have probably already heard is that it was just a huge pleasure and privilege to spend that hour or two with him that night at the table. I treasure every minute that I have been lucky enough to spend with Wash, and I'm delighted he's here. Wash, thank you so much for everything. So we are, some of you have asked why the Asia Society gets involved in this issue in particular, and on that subject I'll just say that since its founding nearly 6 decades ago, the organization has been in the business of trying to find collective solutions to problems that affect Asia and trying to improve what our founder, John D. Rockefeller III, called a deficit of understanding in Asia and between the peoples of the United States and Asia. And I think when you look at the major issues facing the world today and deficits of understanding that we can help address, you would agree that sustainability and the resilience of cities ranks very high among them. And certainly when you meet the people you will hear from in the next few days and the 3 gentlemen I referenced a moment ago, you'll agree that we've assembled a kind of master class on this issue. So without more from me, let me introduce the 3 gentlemen. First, from the Philippines, Secretary Panfilo Lacson is presidential assistant. I don't even have to say who he is, and he gets an ovation. Presidential assistant for rehabilitation and recovery in the aftermath of the super typhoon Yolanda. And this audience knows all too well, and you've seen the video. And of course, for the Secretary and for the people of the Philippines, this is still a work in progress. But we congratulate and thank you, sir, for everything you've done so far. Please. Robert Parker was mayor of Christchurch in New Zealand when the earth shook under that city 3 years ago. Actually, almost exactly 3 years ago, the 22nd of February, 2011. And he was explaining to me in both human terms and scientific terms, which I'm not sure I really understood, the power. It was 6.3 on the Richter scale, but more than that, the quake was only 5 kilometers deep, and it hit right under this great old city in New Zealand. You'll hear a lot more about this, but Mayor Parker was given great credit for his calm, steady, and above all, his effective response to that disaster, which is part of the reason, or I guess the entire reason, why he was knighted and why we must tonight refer to him as Sir Robert Parker. Bob, will you join us? Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Love the music, by the way. And last for the panel, a man who really has dealt with the almost unimaginable. Dr. Kunturo Mangkusubroto, the date that he will always remember is the 26th of December 2004. 230,000 dead from the tsunami. It's really, it's hard to imagine. And 170,000 lost in Banda Aceh alone. And that was where Dr. Kunturo, here he is. Dr. Kunturo led the Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Agency there. And he has been honored in many, many different ways for his efforts in running what became a $7.2 billion aid effort. And really, I think, has become a teachable moment, maybe, not just for others on the panel. Dr. Kunturo, for those of you who don't know, is advising the Philippine government now. And you really, I've just heard a little bit from him this morning. You could ask for no better teacher, and actually no more modest or humble teacher when dealing with these kinds of issues. Now, before we get started, we've seen the very moving, poignant video from the Philippines a moment ago. And of course, most of you in this room need no reminder of the devastation that came with Yolanda. But we do have two very short pieces to share from the other disasters whose officials are represented here. If we can maybe start with the short video from Banda Aceh. Have a look.
years ago, the tsunami and earthquake brought unparalleled tragedy to the people of Aceh and Nias. Family, friends, and homes were lost. What happened was beyond imagination. Some 800 kilometers of coastline, reaching between 4 to 6 kilometers inland, were completely destroyed. Hospitals and health centers were disseminated in their hundreds. Thousands of kilometers of roads were left impassable, linking only a deluge of destroyed seaport and damaged airports. More than 2,000 schools were damaged or destroyed, and some 2,500 teachers were lost to the force of the waves. After the waves returned to the ocean, hundreds of thousands of houses were left drifting on the ocean's calm. The nation and the world shared the grief.
Now, in New Zealand, certainly by comparison, the death toll and the destruction were much less, but if you doubt the terror or the drama of the moment, Bob Parker brought a video actually, which I'd not seen before. And do you want to talk us through that, or?
Thank you, Tom. Just very briefly, we were able to obtain, first of all, a sound recording from a student who had been in a classroom receiving a normal lesson, and she was taping this. And the tape was so profound in terms of the shock that people experience when these extraordinary events arrive, that it's worth playing just to get a sense of what it is like. And then the camera just picks up some of the early minutes of the event, and I use this piece of footage quite often, especially with fellow mayors, and I should acknowledge all of the mayors who are here tonight, and these two extraordinary gentlemen who I have the honor of sitting alongside. Because one of the things that we all have to cope with at these times is the chaos, and the job that we have to do before we can even think about being resilient is, where do you start? So what is it like? What are those moments? And this perhaps gives some small insight into the chaos of those first moments in a major natural disaster.
They say it's got to be actual fraud. Can't be actual fraud.
Sorry? No. No, there's people in here trapped and dead. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, come on, man. Well, it doesn't matter, mate. Have some respect. Yeah, well, there's one. Go down there.
And I'll just spool through it just a wee bit. So we won't spend too much time, but just pick up a couple of the moments that are in there.
Hey? Yeah, I was upstairs. They got really bad, so I dived under the table, something landed on the table and crushed the table in half, which got me, and then I turned around to find him, and it was dust, and he just went straight through the floor.
Is just a little bit of footage that was taken in one street of many, many streets, and many of you who are here today would have witnessed those things. And for us, one of the great questions is, well, what can we do before these events happen to ensure that the outcomes can be better, and what is it that we have to do immediately afterwards to ensure that we build and rebuild in its place cities and towns, communities and villages that are more resilient, that are better, that in some way are able to perhaps make up for the great losses that we've had, make some meaning out of these events.
If I can, though, before we get to the preparedness issue, all these videos, I think, call a certain question into mind, and I'd like to just read a quote, if I may. This was an article just written a couple of weeks ago. It was actually about the anniversary of the Christchurch disaster. Quote, "1 minute you're the mayor of a vibrant city, and then suddenly everyone is turning to you for answers that you don't have. What do we do now? Where do we go? Is it safe? Is it over? Who is dead? Who is injured? And how are we going to save them?" And I wonder, and it isn't just a question for Bob, but for anybody else in the group, in the initial moments, Dr. Conturo, you were very eloquent this morning talking about the importance of decision-making at the outset. What are the most important issues, do you think, in those horrible moments that really seem, no matter how well prepared you are going to be extremely, extremely difficult to respond to?
When tsunami hit Aceh in the Boxing Day of 2004, I was in Jakarta, and the tsunami was hit in Aceh. That's 3 hours flight from Jakarta. So the first thing I did is turn on the television, and the first minute it came with an announcement that 1,200 people died. Another 10 minutes, it increased to 6,000. And then another 5 minutes, it went up to 8,000. And then it went up until the evening, it reaches 120,000. And after that, there's no more counting. So where does it stop? So I was not the mayor, I'm not the governor, I'm just a citizen living there in Jakarta. So I'm more relaxed. The pressure is not with me. But once the president asked me to lead the reconstruction of Aceh, then the whole thing started ticking. How much? Where? The conflict in Aceh. It's a battle between the capital city and the Aceh independent movement. So the whole thing becomes so complex such that the next 3 months actually I was negotiating with the president on how to do the reconstruction successfully from my term. I need this power, I need that law, I need this, I need that kind of things, okay? it's an unbelievable long list of requests to the president, such that the president say that, wait a minute, I cannot provide you with all what you ask. But I told him, well, I'll be there 3 hours from Jakarta in the heat, and I'm directly responsible for this. So please provide me with all this power. So that negotiation took about 3 months. A special law, a special organization, and basically I was the Prime Minister of Aceh. Why is it like that? It's not because only the tsunami that destroyed Aceh, but also the combat, the battle. The battle between the Indonesian army with the insurgent, with the guerrilla. That is making things really complicated. But once I'm on the ground there, then I see that let's do something. Let's forget about the statistics, the figures, because all this change every day. There's no way to stop all this. So the only thing, do something, start working. Any mistake, correct them. Another mistake, correct them. But move, because 500,000 people waiting in the tent, waiting in the temporary shelter, they are waiting for their house. And there's no movement on the ground, you're in deep trouble. Because they will say, you do nothing here, you go back to Jakarta, and that's the end of my mission, if that happens.
So Secretary Lacson, if I can ask you, I mentioned in the introduction that you two have collaborated, or at least Dr. Conturo has helped the Philippine government. Dr. Conturo just said that the pressure wasn't on him. Now the pressure is on you, right, here to some extent. What are the first questions you have for somebody who has been through something like that, and the useful lessons you think that you and your country can draw?
First, I've been in good company since early this afternoon. We had a round table discussion with Dr. Contoro, with some multilateral and some members of the cabinet. Even COA was there. And COA did not react to what Dr. Contoro said, because what did you say, Contoro, about the COA? It's either you argue with them like hell, or you disregard them.
That's right.
It can never happen in the Philippines. I was at home when I heard about the news of the Yolanda onslaught. I turned on the television set just like what Pak Contoro did. And I never imagined that one day I would be called upon to lead the rehabilitation effort along the Yolanda corridor. My appointment came a month later. I was appointed December 6th. And I wish I had the luxury of 5 months of negotiation that Dr. Contoro had with his president. I had only 2 nights. The only thing that I did was to consult some urban and town planners. Danny Antonio is now my undersecretary, and architect Palafox. All I asked them was, is it doable? And when they said it's doable, then I went back to the president to inform him that I was accepting the job. But before that, I really had second thoughts about, because I've been in law enforcement for 20 years. I was a senator for 12 years. I was enjoying retirement after I stepped down, or after my second term on June 30, 2013. And as I said, I never imagined that I would be involved in a rehabilitation effort that I knew nothing about. But I'm starting to learn with the help of Pak Contoro, and we've been exchanging notes. And there's a whale of difference between the conditions obtaining in Banda Aceh and those in the Philippines. For one, I remember last December when I first met him, he told us that the biggest challenge that he had was coordination. And the key to his success was transparency. I told him this afternoon I subscribe to both words. But he was coordinating from a position of authority, and I don't have that. He could hire and fire. He was the one implementing, and I had nothing of that. But I'm coping with the help of the private sector and all the multilaterals who are still staying along the Yolanda corridor. Something is being done. There's progress in the Yolanda Avenue. 171 cities and municipalities. You know, we held a commitment session last January 7. We just enabled it, but it was the initiative of the private sector. JASA was there. Practically, some of those present here today were there, or tonight were there. And we cut the 171 cities and municipalities into 24. We call them areas of intervention and development, AIDS. And we offered them in a bridal registry mode. We offered them to the probable development sponsors for adoption. And right off, 11 out of the 24 were taken for adoption. Now it's 18 out of 24. We're looking still for sponsors for the 6 other areas or cuts of the 171 cities and municipalities. And I hope there will be some volunteers to take on the 6 other areas tonight. So, as I said, I'm still learning the ropes. This is something very new. I'm the neophyte among the 3 on stage. And I will continue to learn from Pa Contora and hopefully from Sir Robert, Bob. Thank you very much.
Well, I think most people would agree you're pretty good for a neophyte. But can I ask you if you had to identify a single challenge? We're now, we're about 4 months, right, past the date. And is there, if you had to identify 1 or 2 of the biggest challenges that still remain that you worry about at night, what would those be?
It's still coordination. And of course, the usual bureaucratic red tape in government. As I said, we're very lucky that the private sector is there to help out, and the multilaterals are there. Right now, we're still waiting for the post-disaster needs assessment because it's the law. We should wait for that. It should be approved by the President, and from there, we will prepare a master rehabilitation plan. But listening to Dr. Contoro this afternoon, he threw everything out of the window and did it his own way. You know, I was thinking of doing the same, but the Philippine setting is very much different, my friend. So I'll have to do or to live with all the limitations, all the restrictions in my country.
Well, maybe we can pick up on that because clearly Indonesia had a lot of similar issues that maybe you just chose, Dr. Conturo, to attack. I'm not really sure. But before we get there, can both of you and I'm going to still call you Mayor Parker, if you don't mind, because for this discussion, you're still the mayor. You know, both of you made a point this morning that even though these disasters were totally different countries, different scope, different scale, earthquakes versus tsunamis, all the rest, that really the issues you've shared and described in terms of dealing with them are very, very similar. Bob, I think you have a checklist that I've seen in the press of 10 things that you think need to be done. You outlined, Dr. Conturo, 7, you know, what are the most, again, the 1 or 2 signal things, because you really are teachers now for whoever is going to be unfortunate enough in the future to face this kind of issue. Maybe starting with you, Bob, if you were to say, here's the one thing you've got to get right, what is it?
Preparation, as much as you can. You can never, as these gentlemen know, you can never predict exactly what you're going to be facing. But what you can do is ensure that you have worked with your communities from the ground level to the highest level of government, so that people know that there will be a set of procedures, a set of connections that you will make. And you can rehearse those, you can have exercises, and when the day comes, none of the things that you've rehearsed will really be the same at all. But what you will have is an understanding of where you will need to connect, where your lines of support will be, even down to simple things like where's heavy equipment that I can get my hands on quickly? Where am I going to set up my headquarters of the building that I'd planned to set up and didn't exist anymore? So in answer to that, Tom, there is nothing that will ever replace being able to spend as much time as you can ensuring that there are systems and understandings in place for when that day inevitably comes in your community. You would at least have some beginnings to start from. You're not starting from nothing at all.
You want to add one, Dr. Ventura?
Please imagine that you have this kind of job to rebuild an area that was in conflict for 25 years. The local government was paralyzed. It was in isolation for the past 2 years before. You know nothing about the latest situation, and you are given the task. The only thing you can do is just fly there, be on the ground as fast as possible, and look by yourself. So my motto is, the most important thing is that please try to understand that you don't understand. So use your eyes, listen carefully, and be ready that anything you decide now will be changed tomorrow. I really want to have this first step of preparedness, where the heavy equipments are, where the materials are located. We don't know there in Banda Aceh. And it's 3 hours flight. So the most important policy that requested of the president is to open up that region, to welcome everybody who wants to come to Aceh, to help us, and let's work together. So the word is work together. I know nothing about reconstruction, and I believe that the majority of the 800 NGOs and countries and multilateral agencies that came to Aceh, the only thing they have is a good heart. Once they're in Aceh, we had a discussion. Can you bring us backhoes? Can you bring us shovels? Can we bring us these kind of things? Okay. We started, and the statistics say that we have to rebuild or build 90,000 houses. In 1 year time, it went up to 115. Another year, it went up to 139. And at the end of our day there, we've built 140,000 houses.
Wow.
It stopped there. So the whole thing stopped at the last day you are there. The number of schools, the number of village clinics, the kilometers of roads, okay. So be ready and please accept in a humble way that you don't know anything about this. But we have to work together. We have to work together. Nobody is smarter than you. Nobody have more skill than you. Nobody. If you work together, then for sure you can get along and solve the problem. So that is my key. I know nothing about that. I know nothing about conflict. I'm not a military man. I'm not general. I'm just a university professor. Okay, so the only way is communication. Talk here, talk there. It's good that my English is okay, such that I can speak with the 800 NGOs coming from all over the world. And those people, they don't know where is Aceh, what is Islam, what is Sharia. They don't know anything. They don't know about culture. And these people from Aceh, the first time they see white people, it's a kind of a cultural shock for them. Okay? Now they understand that they are Christianity, they are Buddhism. Can you imagine a Jewish organization working in Aceh for 4 years? Never happened before. So these kind of things sometimes is surprising, sometimes is already is in your mind that but you have to prove it. So the way I cannot play smart now. It's very easy for me to tell you the story was what happening 5-6 years ago, but during that time, no, I know nothing. So
I told you he was modest, right? Can we talk a little bit about the incredible influx of international aid and both the good side and the bad side of that? When I was a journalist, I saw on many occasions, the attention that journalists pay to something means a lot of good intentions, a lot of money, a lot of material comes in. You were talking about how in Aceh it was a huge management problem to just address and deal with all this. Secretary Lakson, can you talk about how it is right now in terms of international pledges? First of all, are the pledges coming through? And what other issues do you have with the organization of all this help that's coming in?
Pledges are different from those actually delivered. Right now, I just read in the website that 24.8 billion pesos was pledged from different pledgers. And out of the 24.8 billion, only 648 million has been delivered. So it's roughly 2.6%. Unlike in Banda Aceh, they had a 93% delivered out of the amount pledged. What we do is rely on the private sector. I keep on mentioning private sector because the government has yet to come in. Probably after the PDNA has been finalized and approved by the President and the master plan shall have been submitted and approved, then we will go full swing in the implementation of the rehabilitation efforts. But having said that, things are moving in the 171 cities and municipalities, courtesy of the private sector. We capitalize on their bleeding hearts, because at the outset, we adhered to a policy of inclusion. And since I was in politics for 12 years, I told the President and I told the other cabinet members that I'll be colorblind to politics, especially to local politics, because there are so many political dynamics, especially among the LGUs, governors against mayors, national leadership against, not against, but in conflict with some local politicians. So that's another challenge that we have to contend with. But somehow, the President has been kind enough to really see through all these challenges. And his marching order is just, to me, is just to concentrate on building back better. Because the Philippines is host to at least 20 typhoons. We consume the 26 letters in the alphabet. That's why we start with Agaton, and I think we have already Basyang, and we're on letter C. So we expect 23 typhoons more. So that's the situation in the Philippines, and we have to rush all the rehabilitation work because in 5 to 6 months, we expect a series of typhoons to visit the country. So I just hope what we did in PAR, in my office, is to do a bottom-up approach. And I cleared this with the President. And again, he was kind enough to give his nod. Because if we wait for the national agency to prepare everything, and we don't engage the local government executives, then it will take too long to even start rehabilitation work. So what we did is to go down to the local government units and find out what they need. And if they are capable of submitting their own damage assessment, their needs assessment, and even their own rehabilitation plans, then we proceed, starting with the private sector and eventually plead with our Department of Budget and Management to download resources to those local executives who are capable of administering or doing their own construction work, at least municipal halls, public markets, community centers, and even hospitals, if they're capable of doing their own or preparing their own rehabilitation plan.
Secretary, you just used a phrase that has become very common and in vogue in the disaster relief area, which is building back better. I think the UN coined it originally. And I think it speaks for itself, but basically means if you are unfortunate enough to suffer a calamity like this, make sure that what you build in its place is better than what you had before. And I wonder how difficult from any of your experiences that is, because there may be an obvious thing that the experts tell you you should do with a community or a building or a earthquake-proof or green setup or something, but that may impact in a way that the locals won't like. This I actually know from a little bit of personal experience, even in the New York, New Jersey area, where for a month or two people thought, well, they have to get away from the water after Hurricane Sandy. And then, maybe 2-3 months later, they think, no, you know what, I really like it by the water. And maybe it's a nice day out and my memory is fading a little bit. Have you, I saw in the paper today that there's a new port site coming to Tacloban, right?
Sorry?
I saw in the paper today that a new port has been planned or declared for Tacloban. Maybe I read a bad report. Anyway, can you speak a little bit about what the Building Back Better effort will mean in the Philippines? And I invite either of you gentlemen to jump in as well.
Well, Building Back Better is moving the people away from the unsafe zones. We started out with no-build zones. We became flexible a bit and changed it to no-dwelling zones because there are only two sources of livelihood, means of livelihood in those areas, either agriculture or fishing. And most of those residing along the shoreline or near the shoreline, they need to go there to go back to do their to conduct their livelihood. If we move them to safe zones, say 40 meters away from the coastline, then eventually they will go back because that is their place of livelihood. They cannot earn a living if they are away from those areas. So that's another challenge, and we rely heavily on the local government units to implement the safe and unsafe zones. And so far, they've been responding positively, and they've been very cooperative along this line.
Bob, what's working in Christchurch in this regard?
Well, the question that you've touched on is maybe one of the most difficult areas of all for local authorities and governments to work their way through, because indeed for me Building Back Better does mean that I'm not going to be committing my community back into a situation where a devastating problem that's taken lives, injured many people and cost us a great deal of money to put right, can then reoccur again in the near future. But to other people, it actually means I'm going to get a better street than the one that I had before, and it means a variety of things to a lot of people. So I guess this is where the role of the local community is so important. And I think for us, one of the great lessons around managing these issues, for example, we've had to move several entire suburban areas away, so we've rehoused around about 6,000 families from those areas. We've had to open up new areas of land. And it's a reminder to us that we're dealing with people, that we're not actually dealing with just some kind of geophysical, technical, weather, seismic problem, that we're actually dealing with people throughout this work. So it's not easy. You have to make some hard calls. They're not going to always be popular. But what we have found is that what works is to be open with our communities. If we can explain to them why it is that we need to make these changes and ask them to be, as much as we can, part of that decision-making process, then we get better results. So you have to be incredibly open. You have to be really very honest in these situations. And sometimes there's no getting around it. You just have to make some very difficult, unpopular decisions. That's the nature of the duty of care that I think that you have to carry with you as a government or a local government official. But it's not easy.
And actually, please, we want to leave some time for questions, so if you have any, get them ready. But before we go there, Dr. Conturo, on this point about how hard it can be, you told me a story this morning about the people in Aceh who had a similar issue where, as the memory faded, they started creeping back to the water. Would you share that with the audience?
Yeah. Well, people are very fast to forget. Tsunami in that magnitude that killed 170,000 people in just a matter of 6 months. They already forget. They want to live close to the water again. So it is us, actually, who has the responsibility to set up a mechanism to mitigate if anything happened like that. These people, whether they are religious or it's not the right term, not developed, okay. But basically, if a disaster like that, what happens if a disaster like that come again? Well, that's Allah's will. Let it happen. So we can live with the water again. So when it comes to building back better, for me, the future is yours, those people. Why don't you plan your own village? You want to have your own school? Fine. You want to have your own clinics? Fine. Okay. Now you plan your village. You are going to live this forever. And I'm going to build that according to the plan. But because it's close to the water, it then doesn't give any concern about the earthquake, that kind of things. I have to build evacuation centers. That is the only, what do you call it, mitigation facilities. And all the signs where to run if anything happened like that, okay. That's the most we can do. These people, my term, they are very religious. What will happen in the future, let it happen again. We'll just ready for that. And then they go back to normal. In just 6 months, unbelievable. Maybe 1 or 2 trauma, but you don't see any trauma at all.
On the good news side, you did also say that there have been a great many, I don't know whether they're earthquake-proof, but earthquake-resistant schools built in Aceh. Around the world, we have what are called evacu spots now in New Orleans. I think the same thing exists elsewhere after Hurricane Katrina, because that was a huge problem there. Smart grids for power in a lot of places where that's been a big issue. Are there questions? I'm a little blinded by the light here, but do you have questions? There are microphones on either side that you'll have to come up and come to. I can keep going, but I'm sure there's some questions.